Greetings everyone and welcome to another episode of First Thoughts. My name's Matt Sella and I'm going to be doing a special review for AntMan and the Wasp. So for the first half of this review, I will be doing a non-spoiler general review of the film, but then I'm going to give you a heads up warning. Spoiler talks will happen when I talk about what happens specifically at the end of this film. And believe it or not, I'm going to put up another spoiler warning. Seeing if you haven't seen the Infinity War movie, you still plan on seeing it? Well, I'm going to put up a spoiler within the spoiler. So don't worry, heads up to you guys. If you've seen all the films, then you should be pretty good. If you haven't, fair warning. But for now, non-spoiler talk. So first things first that I gotta point out with this film is I thought it was actually funnier than the first film. Most of the jokes got me laughing. It was really a lot of awkward interactions. It was very character driven. It felt really genuine of where some of the humor came from. It came from the flaws of characters. It came from the observation of certain characters. It worked perfectly fine in this movie and it felt natural, so no real complaints there. Except maybe one con, I would say, is like maybe there was a couple of jokes that fell flat. Granted, I was in a full theater, so there was laughter whenever there was a joke. But there were some lighter laughs on some jokes that didn't quite land for everybody and certainly didn't land for me. I chuckled for sure, but sometimes when jokes happen, and I get them, but I don't go out laughing, take that as you will. Another positive that I want to bring out for this film is I actually really like some of the character interactions, growth, arcs, all that kind of stuff going on in this movie better than the first one. We see Paul Rudd returning as Ant-Man, and this takes place after the events of Civil War, so there's a lot of things that he's done that didn't quite bode well with some of his colleagues, Hank and his daughter, Hope. So throughout the film, you kind of see him trying to really get his life back on track. He wants to start fresh. He wants to be able to see his daughter more as a free man, put his crime life behind him, but at the same time, he still wants to help his friends. He wants to help his daughter. He wants to be useful. He wants to be helpful. But because he's not a perfect guy, he tends to make mistakes and bad judgment calls. And I like the fact that the events of Civil War did tie into his character arc in this film of how he interacts with Hank and Hope. And I suppose that's where the real strength of this movie comes from, is how relatable Paul Rudd's character, Scott Lang, is to us, the general going audience. He wants to do good, he thinks he knows what to do, but sometimes things are over his head, but he tries to go with the flow, and sometimes that opens up the gates to mistakes, and he just wants to gain their forgiveness and trust by proving himself worthy. Kind of comboing them together, Evangeline Lilly, playing Hope, as well as Michael Douglas, playing her father, Hank Pym, they weren't the perfect characters either. Very similar to Scott Lang, these two had their own personal goals going on, and they kind of become selfish in a way where it was mostly their priorities that went over Scott's well-being. You could empathize with them of what they were trying to accomplish. I mean, the whole given premise of this movie is that Hank and Hope believe that Hank's wife, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, she must still be in the quantum realm, and they're hoping that they could rescue her by almost any means necessary.
Dr. Pym, I actually heard what happened to you. You opened up the quantum realm. That's when this crazy creepy ghost who walks through walls and stuff. Stole your tech.
They do get involved in a little bit of an underground black market circle in order to gain the parts they need to build a gate to the quantum realm. You sense that they are willing to do almost anything to accomplish those goals while putting Scott Lang's livelihood at stake. So yes, these are not perfect characters, but they do grow and learn what that means to everyone, not only to themselves and the person they're trying to rescue. And I really appreciate that in this film. It was very much character driven. It was very much how they interacted, whether they value them as equals or just see them as pawns. It was a really good character study in my opinion. And speaking of characters and the overall story, I think one of my favorite points about this film is that it wasn't a over-the-top, world is endangered, universe is being threatened kind of story. It was very self-contained, it was very personally driven. You had characters who just wanted to achieve their goals, and that kind of collaborates with other people who also want to achieve their goals. Ava, played by Hannah John Kamen, is the set villain of this movie, and you would think, man, it's just a throwaway villain, just wants to rule or destroy or whatever. but she doesn't really want to do most of that stuff. She has a very personal goal that she's trying to achieve, and it doesn't really involve any of the destroying groups of people or ruling businesses, none of that stuff, no. She has her own means to get to, very similar to Hank and Hope, and it's just her approach is a little bit more aggressive considering her background.
She seems more intense.
We came from other films where the galaxy was in danger and things like that. This was a very good breath of fresh air for everyone, I would say, considering it's just personal driven stories. As far as cons for me, I think they're mostly just nitpicks, not really big issues that I quite had. And I've already mentioned one con about the jokes not really being perfect. There were a couple of flat ones. There were a couple of plot holes that I don't know if they're quite plot holes, but more like inconsistency in the lore. Like there's been some instances where we ask ourselves, okay, in the first Ant-Man movie, what does the suit do? What does the Pym particle do? It shrinks the space between atoms, making you appear to be smaller, but you're still kind of dense. Well, if you're gonna go beyond the size of atoms, theoretically, your atoms can only get so close to each other that eventually you just couldn't get any smaller. Yet you're still going small enough to go subatomic particle, and then some. I don't think you know how the properties that you set up quite work. But whatever, that they don't really address that. They don't remedy that with some other kind of formula or some other kind of theory. I'm willing to set that aside for now. It's just sci-fi babble. I hate to say that, but that's what it is.
You go low, I'll go high.
I have wings. Why would I go low?
And there's other elements too, because I mean, like, they try to visit the quantum realm quite a few times, and there's some instances that I don't quite understand or get, but we'll get into that in the spoiler section. We're still in the non-spoilers, so don't you worry. And the only other con I can think of is that, well, there's a lot of de-aging going on. We saw a bit of that in the first Ant-Man movie. We've seen that in Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I might be forgetting a couple other ones, but there was a bit more of that going on. In this film, it's like in the very beginning, we see a young Michael Douglas and a Michelle Pfeiffer. And Michelle Pfeiffer kind of looked a little rubber face-like to me. It was a little strange in some parts. It wasn't perfect. But for the most part, the de-aging worked pretty fine for me. There were other characters that were de-aged, kind of shown in flashback sequences and things like that. They were fairly solid, but wasn't perfect. We're still trying to get over that hill of Uncanny Valley. But I do believe we'll get there, because it is getting better each time.
We're gonna die. I don't wanna die. We didn't die!
Hey, what'd I miss?
We were just tiny.
So what was my overall thoughts on the film? I gave it 2 solid thumbs up. I thought it was a pretty good movie, pretty good entry to the MCU, and a good break from the whole universe is in peril, we must save it, and a little bit more of a down-to-earth personal story. And if you enjoy heist films and good old Paul Rudd being his ruddy self, I think you'll really enjoy this movie. Alright guys, I'm going to jump into some spoiler reviews. I'm going to talk about a little bit of what happened in the end, kind of emphasize a little bit more of my pros and cons, just a little bit. So you have been warned, spoilers ahead. So near at the end of the film, you saw what happens. Hank Pym was able to use the tunnel to get to the quantum realm and finally reunite with his wife, who has been stuck in the quantum realm for 30 years. And while that was a really cool concept, it kind of made me wonder, how did she manage to stay alive for 30 years? The film establishes itself that when you're in the quantum realm, the human mind can only take so much and just goes mad and presumptuously you die. But for some reason, Michelle Pfeiffer, her character, she was able to stay alive and pretty sane during the last 30 years. I don't know how she was able to eat or sleep or poo or really do anything we humans do on a daily basis in the quantum realm for 30 years, but she eventually gained magical powers, so I don't know, maybe she became one with the quantum realm where she's like, I don't need to do anything, I just hibernate and send out messages via antennae. Which that was kind of funny, having her speak through Paul Rudd. That was adorable. Also, the same fact, when they finally reunited in the quantum realm, they both had their helmets off. Like, how were they able to breathe? Where's the air? You could play that Galaxy Quest joke a million times. That definitely warrants it for this kind of things. There's no air. How would you know? It's science babble. And kind of like what I was saying about character arcs, I was glad that Ava was not like a villain that you had to kill and do a major clash with the end. She actually did get some payoff in the end, where Michelle Pfeiffer, sorry, I forget the character's name, was able to heal her for her phasing thing that she was trying to fix the whole time. I thought that was really sweet. It was a good change of things where it's like, you don't need to kill the bad guy to have the ultimate end. Everyone was able to mutually get what they want, and if Ava was only patient enough and more open-minded, she probably could have got what she wanted a lot sooner, but again, she spent most of her life phasing and trying not to die by using these machines. She obviously went mad because of the effects of the quantum, so there's some warrant to that, I can see that. In the end, everything was honky-dory, lived happily ever after. Scott was able to mend well with his daughter. His family is still doing good. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Randall Park's in the movie. I love that guy. Fresh off the boat, he was in The Interview, the Seth Rogen comedy. I really enjoy his performance in this. He was just a very jovial guy. Took his job super seriously, but he was very open-minded to a lot of things. It was kind of funny. Very charming. Alright, here's a second spoiler warning. If you have not seen Infinity War, turn back now. Give us a like, subscribe, comment, do your whole thing now, because I'm going to be talking about the very, very end, which is a mid-credit scene, and this heavily influenced by the Infinity War movie. So if you haven't seen Infinity War, you want to see it after seeing this, or what have you, I recommend you stop the video now. Otherwise, I'll continue. Spoilers. Double the spoilers. 2 spoilers. Haven't seen Infinity War. Please, stop watching. But if you have, let's continue. So what's kind of cool about that mid-credit scene is that for a while, before we actually did get Avengers Infinity War, I kind of theorized that when Thanos obtained the gauntlet and got all the gems, and this is before the movie, the Infinity War movie, I'm saying before this, I knew that the Infinity Stones have effects on reality, time, and all that kind of stuff. So when we saw the first AntMan movie, and I wonder if Scott has a slight advantage where if he can shrink enough to go through the quantum realm, eventually whatever powers emit from the Infinity Gauntlet won't be able to reach him because the quantum realm has its own rules, its own reality, its own laws that the Infinity Gauntlet itself cannot reach or affect it. Perhaps Ant-Man's the key to getting it off of him, or getting around the back door to like remove it or sabotage it from causing further harm. That was my original theory way before Infinity War happened. So now with this end credit scene, it's ambiguous, but I'm still in support of my own theory. My co-host Jared's a little skeptical on that, but I'm gonna say because Scott went to the quantum realm for that very instant to gather the energy for Ghost or Ava, he was actually in a safe bubble where the snap could not reach him. Because we saw in the end credits, Michelle Pfeiffer, Hank Pym, Hope, they all been disintegrated in a slightly different way. They actually were soot and soot fell. If I remember correctly, in Infinity War, they turned to ash, but then the ash just kind of disappears. Now, granted, people have speculated that the OG, the original Avengers, were the only ones that were not snapped out of existence. So I think that's partially a complaint for me, is that I feel like one of those 3 who were waiting for Scott to come back, I think one of them should have remained in existence. I don't think all 3 should have. Like when Scott was trying to call back saying like, okay guys, the radio went dead. This is not funny guys, can you bring me back up? And then maybe eventually you hear like panting or screaming or something on his radio after like a few seconds, whether if it's Michelle Pfeiffer, Evangeline Lilly, or Michael Douglas's character. One of those guys saying like, something happened. We don't know what happened, but the others, something happened. And Scott's like, what? What happened? What happened? And then cuts to whoever that character is and then shows the ash. Thus, those characters were affected by the snap. But we didn't get that. All 3 disintegrated. So now Scott really doesn't have a way to return. So I guess it makes sense narratively of where he could play a role in Avengers 4. We didn't get confirmation whether if Ava's character or her father figure, Lawrence Fishburne's character, did they get affected by the snap? Something tells me one of them has not been, especially Lawrence Fishburne, because he can use some of the notes of Hank Pym's research to bring Scott back to help remedy this whole situation. That might be the direction they're going. We really don't know. Avengers 4 will happen a lot sooner than we expect. Scott, you lucky, you were in the quantum realm, so you were perfectly safe from the influence of the Infinity Stone, so good on ya. Come back to us. Paul Rudd, you're a funny guy. Come back. Please. Alright guys, let me know what were your thoughts on the film in the comment section below. Did you enjoy Ant-Man and the Wasp? Did you not like it that much? Did you prefer the first one? Or you're just not really into the whole Ant-Man storyline? Let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed reviews just like this one, I recommend you check out my playlist here. Or if you just want to watch something random on our channel, click here. And be sure to subscribe. This is Matt Sella signing off and saying, to be continued.